Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stuff I Found Interesting. Today's rabbit hole is hydrogen engines. Years ago, I was at a car show and saw Toyota's Mirai in its first or second year of release. You couldn't even buy the car, since there would be no way to fuel it. Part of the information shared in the displays around the car highlighted that California would have a few dozen fueling stations. That was it for the entire US at the time. I quickly forgot about the Mirai and moved on to the Ferrari area of the show. Over the past few weeks, I have been looking into a few different alternative propulsion methods to the standard rocket fuel, nuclear being a highlight. Once I had finished looking stuff up for the day, I somehow sparked the memory of the hydrogen-powered Mirai. I thought, is that thing even still around? And has anyone done anything with hydrogen-powered engines? So I started looking. The Mirai is still around, and hydrogen as a fuel source is interesting. First, let's start with what these engines are. Hydrogen engines can be split into two broad categories. The first is a type of internal combustion engine that uses hydrogen as a fuel instead of gasoline or diesel. The basic principle of operation is similar to a conventional internal combustion engine, where a mixture of fuel and air is ignited to produce a controlled explosion that drives a piston, which in turn powers the engine. In these hydrogen engines, the hydrogen is stored in a high-pressure tank and is then introduced into the combustion chamber, where it reacts with the air to produce energy. Since there is no carbon in the process, there are no carbon emissions. This is a good thing, but there is something less than great about these types of engines that I'll get into later. The other type of hydrogen engine is called a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. With these, it is actually extremely similar to all electric cars today. The hydrogen fuel cells take the place of the batteries within the electric car. Similar to how a battery works, a current is created by breaking down the hydrogen atom into protons and electrons using an anode and cathode. That current is then fed into an electric motor, and the car moves. Fuel cell vehicles use the chemical energy of hydrogen instead of combustion. Now, saying that we could use hydrogen as fuel sounds great and all, but how do we get it? Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, but it doesn't occur naturally as a gas on Earth. Instead, it must be produced from other substances such as water, natural gas, and coal. There are several methods for producing hydrogen, and each has its own advantages and disadvantages. Steam methane reforming is the most common method of hydrogen production, accounting for about 95% of hydrogen produced globally. It involves heating methane from natural gas in the presence of steam and a catalyst to produce hydrogen and carbon dioxide. Electrolysis of water is a process that involves splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen using an electric current. The hydrogen produced through electrolysis can be used as a fuel or as a feedstock for other chemical processes. The gasification of coal process involves heating coal to high temperatures in the presence of steam and oxygen to produce a mixture of hydrogen and carbon monoxide, which can then be converted into hydrogen using a chemical process called the water-gas shift reaction. Photoelectrochemical water splitting is an emerging technology that uses solar energy to split water into hydrogen and oxygen using a combination of photovoltaic cells and catalysts. Biological hydrogen production involves using bacteria or algae to produce hydrogen through a chemical process. Of these methods, some of them have carbon emissions, which seems to defeat the purpose of getting a fuel that won't contribute to greenhouse gases. Others that use some form of electricity to break down water into hydrogen and oxygen avoid that problem, but that just adds to the overall price of the resulting fuel. Since steam methane reforming accounts for such a large percentage of hydrogen production, I started looking into that process. Here's how it works. First, natural gas, which is primarily methane, is purified to remove impurities such as sulfur and other contaminants. This is necessary to prevent damage to the catalysts used in the reforming process. The purified natural gas is then mixed with steam and fed into a reformer. The reformer contains a catalyst typically made of nickel, which reacts with the steam and natural gas to produce a mixture of hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and carbon monoxide. The mixture of hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and carbon monoxide is passed through a shift converter, which converts the carbon monoxide into additional hydrogen and carbon dioxide. The resulting gas steam, which contains hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and other gases, is purified to remove and capture carbon dioxide and the other gases, which can be used or stored for industrial purposes. The purified hydrogen is then compressed and stored in high-pressure tanks for transport and use in fuel cells or other hydrogen applications. Once it has been put in tanks, it needs to be transported to fueling stations. The tanks themselves are typically made of strong materials such as carbon fiber, and the hydrogen is compressed to pressures of up to 10,000 psi. The compressed hydrogen can then be transported in specifically designed trailers or trucks, and then stored at fueling stations in high-pressure tanks until it is dispensed into a vehicle's tank. The steam methane reforming process produces hydrogen at large scales and at a relatively low cost. It does have drawbacks, though. One of the primary concerns is the carbon dioxide emissions associated with the process. Additionally, it relies on natural gas, which is a finite and non-renewable resource. Even with these issues, steam methane reforming is still a critical technology in the production of hydrogen and will likely play a large role in the transition to a more sustainable energy system until we can find something better. For the car enthusiasts out there that can rebuild their own cars, you can technically convert your own car to be fueled by hydrogen instead of gasoline. There are some serious modifications needed, but the majority of the car would run the same way. Some of the key changes that you would need to do is getting a fuel stack, hydrogen storage and delivery system, along with changes to the electrical system and engine control unit. The fuel cell stack is the heart of a hydrogen-powered car, converting hydrogen into electricity that can be used to power the vehicle. A fuel cell stack consists of several individual fuel cells which are connected in a series to produce the required voltage and current. A hydrogen storage system is required to store the hydrogen fuel on board the vehicle. This typically involves high-pressure tanks, which can store hydrogen at pressures up to 10,000 psi. A fuel delivery system is needed to get the hydrogen from the storage tanks to the fuel cell stack. This system includes a pump pressure regulator and other components to ensure a consistent supply of hydrogen to the fuel cell stack. The electrical system of a hydrogen-powered car must be modified to handle the higher power output of the fuel cell stack and to recharge the vehicle's batteries. This typically involves upgrading the alternator, battery, and electrical wiring. The engine control unit must be reprogrammed to manage the fuel cell system and ensure optimal performance and efficiency. In addition to these modifications, other changes may be required to the vehicle's cooling system, suspension, and overall weight balance to accommodate the added weight of the hydrogen storage system and other components. Before you start on your next project car, there are some pros and cons with hydrogen internal combustion engines that need to be considered. If you want to make the conversion anyway, just for the challenge, then ignore these concerns. Let's start with the pros. These hydrogen engines are based on the traditional internal combustion engine, which means that they are a well-understood technology and widely used in other vehicles. Hydrogen internal combustion engines can be less expensive to produce than the fuel cell versions because they don't require complex fuel cell stacks. Refueling these engines with hydrogen is similar to refueling a traditional gasoline engine and can be done relatively quickly. Now the cons. While these hydrogen engines are more efficient than traditional gasoline engines, they are also less efficient than fuel cell designs, which can convert a larger portion of the energy in hydrogen into useful power. While hydrogen internal combustion engines produce less emissions than traditional gasoline engines, they still produce some, including nitrogen oxides and carbon monoxide. These emissions make it so that this hydrogen engine design cannot be considered zero emission. Considering that one of the main points of going with a hydrogen engine is to go green, hydrogen internal combustion engines aren't a path that most manufacturers are willing to go down anymore. The hydrogen cars that are manufactured now all use the hydrogen fuel cell design. This style of hydrogen engine is considered a zero-emission solution with no tailpipe emissions. They are also highly efficient since they convert a larger percentage of the energy in hydrogen into useful power. I saw some that reported upwards of 50% efficiency. This is a significant improvement over traditionally powered vehicles. Diesel engines are generally around 30% with some outliers at 41%. Gasoline engines are even worse at a typical 20% efficiency with peaks around 37%. That being said, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles do not live in a world of sunshine and rainbows. They are generally much more costly to produce. At Toyota's price point for the Mirai, it looks like they lose a significant amount of money on every sale. Even with Toyota's generosity of not making you pay what it costs for them to produce it, unless you live in specific areas, you wouldn't even be able to use your shiny new hydrogen car as anything other than a lawn ornament. There are currently 55 fueling stations that you would be able to use in the United States, according to the Department of Energy, all of which are in California. As long as you live, work, and never want to leave San Francisco or Los Angeles, then maybe a hydrogen car is for you. If you want to go a bit further afield, then maybe something else would be best for you. So there you have it. I think the only reason you would buy a hydrogen engine car would be for either the status of it or you are truly all in on the zero emission aspect of car ownership. If you are someone like Jay Leno and absolutely love cars in all their forms and have some extra cash burning a hole in your pocket, then go for it. If you only care about going green and having no emissions, then some form of electric car would likely be your best bet, even with all the challenges that electric cars have. If you don't care about either of those things, then find a car that speaks to you and you can have a good time in, whatever that may be. I think in the far future, when the hydrogen creation process is so easy and has no downsides, we should all look back into hydrogen engines. Hydrogen itself is the most abundant resource in the universe. It makes sense that we should come up with some technologies that take advantage of that. It certainly makes more sense than using finite resources that, as far as we know, are limited to our own planet. We will outgrow Earth eventually. Earth itself will not be able to sustain all of humanity at that point. Developing technologies that will be able to utilize fuel found everywhere just makes sense in the long term. Thank you all for learning with me. As always, let me know if I missed anything or got anything wrong. I would love to learn more. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing. If you did not like what you heard, thank you for sticking with me this far. I appreciate the time that you have spent watching this video. No matter who you are, you only get 24 hours in a day. Thank you for spending a portion of it with me. See you next time.